Good morning. Today my name is Eluka Ifeze. I'm a master student in AUM. So today I'll be talking about cloud vulnerability management, the frameworks that are used and the tools. So today I'll be focusing more on the NIST, that's the NIST, National Institution of Standards and Technology, and also CIS, that's the Center for Internet Security. Those will be the frameworks that I'll be talking about today. So first of all, I would like to do a little bit of introduction about what cloud security is, because this is all about cloud security. So cloud security is crucial for protecting sensitive data and preventing unauthorized access and mitigating cyber threats. So what this means is the data that is on the cloud, most organizations and businesses, they utilize the cloud, a lot of tools utilize the cloud, everything as a cloud. So when we talk about cloud security, we're talking about how to prevent sensitive data from being hacked, how to mitigate those data when they're being hacked, and how to ensure that the business continue or the application utilizing the cloud continue without stopping. So, like I said, I'll be talking about the security aspect, but I'll be talking about vulnerability management framework. So, these frameworks, like I said, are the NIST and the CIS. They are actually used to identify, classify, remediate, and mitigate security weaknesses in the IT infrastructure, especially in the cloud. Not just only in the cloud, but in the entire IT infrastructure. But this time around, I'm focusing more about the cloud. So first of all, I'll talk about the NIST framework. That's the cybersecurity framework. So this is just a framework that you can use to protect yourself in the cloud, but you can also use it for your personal organization infrastructure. Like I said, this framework is basically just for IT infrastructure, anything IT infrastructure, but we can also utilize it in the cloud. So first of all, the NIST has various functions in protecting the IT infrastructure. So as I discussed, I'm really discussing about the cloud. So I'm talking about the cloud, yeah. The first thing the NIST does in the function is to identify. So when you identify, it means you're discovering or understanding the organization asset, the risks and the vulnerabilities. So when we talk about the asset in the cloud, we need to identify the entire asset, everything that the organization have in the cloud. Then we assess the risk to we identify the risks that can actually affect the cloud, affect those assets, and we determine the vulnerabilities. After we do that, under the identifying function, we create a comprehensive inventory of systems and potential cybersecurity exposure. So what this means is that we have all those inventory, we list them down. We make sure we write them down, write out the risks. We can't actually get the entire risks that can occur, but we need to just jot down the ones that we can come up with. Then after that, the next function in the NIST is to protect. That's you implement a safeguard and access control. So now that you've already identified all the assets, the risks and vulnerabilities that can affect these assets, then you have to implement like a policy, uh, a policy, like I said, that can actually safeguard those assets, putting access controls, you develop putting encryption mechanism, whatever means that can actually mitigate these vulnerabilities. So that's another function in the NIST. The third function is to detect. So now that you've already implemented these policies, the controls, the firewalls, in the cloud, now you have to do an continuous monitoring. So most of these tools, like for example, in the normal IT infrastructure, we have like the NIDS, that's a network intrusion detection system or a prevention system. These are this comes for constant monitoring. You can also implement like a CM, for example, Splunk, so where you can always be monitoring log files of traffic that are coming into the network. Those are like some of the features that you can also do. So you need to configure a real-time alerting because sometimes you can't always be monitoring it 24/7. So there should be like an implementation that would allow you to send alert in case there's something fishy. Then the fourth function in the NIST is actually response. Now that okay, we've been hacked or we found like a vulnerability, what do we do? So we have to create an incident response protocol. So that's like a document or a strategy or a policy that will tell us, okay, when we are being hacked or after we've been hacked, what can we do? What should we do when we are being infiltrated in the cloud? So in this aspect, you have to define a clear procedure. So whoever reads this, we understand, okay, this is the procedure to do. How do I mitigate this incident? What should I do next? And the last function in the NIST is the recover. So you design like a business continuity. For example, let's say the department for sales has been hacked. So what do you do? How do you recover so that the business doesn't stop? You can't say, okay, because the sales team has been hacked, then they should no longer, the business should shut down. No, there should be like a recovery plan. Like, okay, do we move? We have like a backup that we can just restore the maybe like 3 days backup or a 1 month backup, something like that. There should be like a plan that okay, if we're being hacked and we've responded to the hack, but how can we continue the business till we completely mitigate the threat? So this is where you design like a systematic approach for service restoration. Like I just said, to back up. There are many strategy plans that you can use for this in the cloud. So still explaining more of the NIST, it provides like a versatile blueprint for security. So you can customize it's not fixed for an organization. So based on the organization um platform, then you have to like, different organizations have different assets. So that's how it is too in the cloud. Different clouds uses different technologies, different hardware components. So this NIST plan is actually different for different clouds. So like I said in the news, it gives us that um framework, that blueprint for security. So one example is misconfigured access control. That's for AWS. You can use a misconfigured configuration for storage buckets. That way they can infiltrate your AWS. Also the IAM risks, whereby you give the person more rights than the person require, and that way they can utilize it to do extra stuff in the cloud. You can also this plan actually makes the cloud infrastructure to be proactive to detect and mitigate. So when you use the misconfigured access control, the IAM risks, the shared responsibility model gap, these are like things that the container security also, because in the cloud is mostly virtualization. So we need to put in the right configuration. So within NIST, it can actually give you how you can, protect this cloud. This framework, like I mentioned, you detect the clouds, you protect it, find a way to protect individual containers in the cloud, and so on. So when you want to implement the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, um, like I said, it's a strategic process for defining the cybersecurity objectives. So you need to first do those 5 functions that I just mentioned. After you do them, after establishing those goals, then you evaluate the vulnerabilities. What are the vulnerabilities that can actually happen in the cloud? So based on these insights, then you now start implementing. So that's just how you implement the NIST framework. You actually identify, that's always the first thing, you identify all the cloud infrastructures and all the cloud assets. Then you determine the risks that are associated with them. If it's, for example, a physical risk too in the cloud, what about tsunami? Depending on the location of where the cloud data center is. So these are like some of the things you utilize when you're using the NIST framework. Also, another framework is the CIS control, um, Center for Internet Security. They are like set of actions designed to reduce security risks, and increase the organization defense. So they provide like a specific benchmark tailored towards cloud platforms. For example, they provide a benchmark for AWS, Azure, even the Google Cloud. These are like the big cloud companies. So it makes cloud security environment. So if they have like this benchmark, they provide you the overview, give you information. So when you're protecting your own cloud, you use these frameworks to also find vulnerabilities, and this will help you protect your organization data or clouds. So, for example, this is an example of um, the IAM I'm talking about. So when you use the right access control for the IAM, you can say the company, different departments. So you allocate different departments the rights that they require. So it's always very important, especially this is one of the issue that we usually experience in the cloud. Um, Access rights. So when you check the IAM policies, you determine which user requires more permission and least permission. So these are like some of the steps you can use to increase security. Because if the wrong person gets the wrong access, it can also cause damage to the cloud. So if you look at it, the NIST CIF, that's the Cybersecurity Framework, and the CIS control, they both emphasize on risk-based approach towards cybersecurity. So they complement each other. They enable the organization to balance detailed guidance. They provide a strategic, flexible planning for security practices. But I would tell you that the CIS are like more prescriptive. They offer specific actionable step like procedures more towards risk compared to the NICS. The NICS just give you like a broader framework design on how to do it. So, like I said, I'll be discussing on some of the tools that we can use to protect the cloud. We can use the Qualys, which it's very popular. It offers like a continuous monitoring and detailed report that the cloud can use, for vulnerability management. Another one too of the cloud is the AWS Inspector. This is used by Amazon itself. It provides like an automated security awareness. It helps identify the cloud infrastructure if you're using AWS, using AWS workload. Azure too, which is owned by Microsoft, Azure Security Center also provides like a real-time threat protection and compliance monitoring for whether an hybrid cloud or just a full public cloud, as long as you're using Microsoft. So this is an example of how the Qualys cloud vulnerability management is. It gives you that dashboard where you can, check for it. It gives you like that score. Okay, if you have a threat, the notification. So this is like a very good tool for you to monitor. It gives you like a detailed report and helps even automate some of the vulnerability assessments in the cloud environment. All you just need to do is to plug it to your cloud. It's like an API. It identifies even any misconfiguration you have, prioritizes risks. It ensures that you are even also working with the compliance of the organization. Like if you are like on Europe, you need to follow the GDPR. So it tells you, okay, if you are actually in compliance with the GDPR standards, in that region. It gives a lot of functionalities when you use the Qualys management. So this is another example. This is the cloud workload protection in Qualys. So they um they actually do the compliance, the automation. They have automation, intrusion detection system in the cloud, anti-malware. All these things are, you just connect them to the cloud and you're good to go. So now for the Amazon Inspector, this is from Amazon itself, the AWS Inspector. When you use the AWS cloud platforms, um, it is like an automated security assessment tool. So you just plug it to, it's like a feature in Amazon. You plug it to your like EC2. The EC2 means like a server. So you have like your own cloud container. So what happens here is that as a developer, you just push in your codes and every other thing. But a cybersecurity engineer uses the AWS to inspect the entire container that you're talking about. Then it identifies vulnerabilities. It analyzes the entire application configuration, checks how the deployment was done, gives you like a detailed report of, okay, this is if if there's a misconfiguration, it tells you all that. It helps, maintain AWS itself. So the last tool I'm talking about here is the Amazon Security Framework, which is very, very good. You can use it for the hybrid. You can also connect it to, if you are using like a private cloud, as long as you're using a Microsoft this thing, using a Microsoft application, Microsoft operating system, and or let's say you use the Microsoft 365, you use the Azure, as long as you're using a Microsoft, this security center can provide you, the protection, a real-time threat protection. It helps with the cloud vulnerability management. All of them do the same thing. They are always identifying misconfigurations. They check, prioritize your risks. They offer like recommendations too, from the dashboard itself. So, some of the best practices, in vulnerability management, because you can't always have 100% um, security, but you can always keep improving your security. So the best way is always to do a continuous scanning, of your cloud, a continuous scanning. You prioritize risks. It's very essential, especially when it comes to vulnerability management, because each day threats are coming, malwares are always coming every day. So one tool you can use is a cloud defense.ai. So it enhances like the process of providing the contextual analysis, it gives you like a better decision making, and also gives you information. So um they it it provides it, you can use it on any cloud environment. So it's just like an API where you connect it to, it gives you a report, it assesses everything about the cloud, it checks for the threat. It also gives you like a remediation recommendation itself. So continuous scanning is very important when it comes to vulnerability management, because each day that there are new threats coming, there are also new ways to mitigate those threats. So in the continuous scanning tool, you can also use Qualys. Like I said, Qualys is a tool that gives you like that dashboard view, telling you, giving you suggestions, scanning your entire cloud. You can use Tenable. Tenable is also a cloud-based vulnerability management platform. You can check them out. They actually offer you a continuous asset discovery. They keep scanning your entire cloud to see if there are new assets that has been added. They also provide you risk-based vulnerability prioritization also. They also give a comprehensive report, the same way the Amazon Inspector does in the cloud. They help you automate some of these, you don't need to go on your own to scan. They help you automate the continuous scanning to identify any security gap that and misconfiguration in real time. They are fast, they utilize artificial intelligence to carry out all this information. They also ensure that you are compliant with the security standard based on the region that you are to. So some of the misconfiguration that we have in cloud, it's the IAM, which I just um gave you an overview when it comes to permission. Another misconfiguration is from the AWS three bucket. So the attacker identifies like the API key to access the S3 bucket, and from there, if you can talk to the AWS S3 bucket, he can manipulate the S3 bucket. The S3 bucket is actually just for storage. So the best thing you can do is actually using the least privilege for your access control. So the least privilege actually means giving each user the minimum, or the minimum rights that he needs. So for example, let's say the sales department, they only need to have access to the sales documents. They do not have right to delete any other department folder. So the IT person will have rights to do certain things based on their IT level. So one of the tools you can use to help with this misconfiguration is using the AWS secret manager and Azure keyboard. So this way they save those APIs. So if an attacker gets hold of this API, he can manipulate a lot of things in the cloud. So you can use the AWS secret manager to actually store the sensitive information about the API keys, the credential. That way the API keys will not be, same. For example, when you're using an asymmetric encryption, the private key must be on the server, must be hidden. No one has to see it except the platform that is going to be using it to decrypt. So you can use those AWS Secret Manager to store those kind of APIs, to store those keys, the private keys, whereby no one will be able to see it. Another way for us to, the best practices for us to mitigate and to secure the cloud is also performing penetration testing and patching. So, when once in a while, you simulate attacks to identify any vulnerabilities in your security, in your cloud. This way, the more you do this, you'll be able to discover a lot of flaws, and there are tools that you can also use to do this. The Qualys actually provide that platform because they're always regularly updating themselves. So they are actually performing vulnerability. They perform penetration testing. You can use the CVE tools, those information, use those things to practice on your cloud to see if your cloud is secured. And those, when you're using Qualys, they now give you a report that, okay, yes, this is perfect. So this approach strengthens like the defense. The more you keep testing your system to see, okay, it has like a vulnerability. That way you can always find a way to mitigate those vulnerabilities before it even happens by the real hacker. So this ensures that the system remains resilient against emerging threats. So another way it's actually to secure the containers, because in the cloud we use virtualization. In this virtualization, there are a lot of operating systems that are handling different stuff. So securing the container is very important. One important thing is using a signed image. So for example, if we're talking about the Docker here, we download the right operating system from the Docker registry, because sometimes if you download them elsewhere and install them, they might already be reverse engineered to do some certain things. So always use the right operating system. Enforce the least privilege policies, like I said, give the user the minimum right he needs to actually do his stuff. You don't give them the entire right, you give them the rights that they require to do their job. Also implementing an overlaying networking container. So in Docker, this is what an overlayer means, is that each container has its own networking. So whenever they need to communicate with one, the overlay network is the one that sent it. So they don't have access to the main host. These are like, for example, if we're using a type 2 virtualization whereby there's an host and there are guest hosts. So you don't give the container rights to the main host system. So they should be like a firewall, like a security, which is what the overlay network does. It communicates among these different guest hosts. That way, you can, if one container is being hacked, there's a way you can always mitigate it so it doesn't affect the rest, and also even the host computer. So you also need to use a monitoring tool. For example, the Docker daemon is the one that manages the containers, the images. When you send in this command, the Docker daemon is the one that handles this container. So that way it also provides you the monitoring capabilities to detect any anomalous activities. So like I said, with these few practices, running continuous scanning, doing irregular penetration testing, and also trying to segregate, different permissions for different tools in the cloud. Using the frameworks, using these tools, they also provide you suggestion to your clouds, because you can't really know everything. These are like tools that are out there. They provide you like an organization overview of your entire cloud, giving you reports, checking vulnerabilities regularly on your cloud, doing your scanning, also running patch management on your cloud. With this, you can be able to reduce your risks in your cloud, and in that way you can update your strategy in following trends and handling new trend. So the main thing for you to perform security in the cloud is always to be proactive, especially when it comes to misconfiguration. That is one of the key issues that we always face in the cloud. Misconfiguration, it can actually open doors to a lot of vulnerabilities in the cloud. Thank you very much. So these are like some of the references I use, the Cloud Defense AI, which is where I got the information that you can actually use this. It's just an API that you can connect to your cloud, and they help you perform some of those reports and vulnerabilities scanning. Thank you very much.